Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ideal Traits Wednesday workshop. Thank you so much for coming today. We do actually have a special guest. Faith, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. My name is Faith Bailey. I've been here for almost 5 years now. I am the hiring services manager that really kind of spearheads the engagement program that we have over here at Ideal Traits. So one of the things that we do actually is the group and video interviews. So wanted to kind of hop on and join Monica today to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Excellent. Yes. And again, as always, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, we do have a chat feature that you can utilize. And as well as this will be recorded and sent to you afterwards. So if you would like to check it out later on, feel free to watch it there. Uh, but we'll go ahead and give it just another minute to see if anyone else is going to be popping in. And then what do you say we go ahead and get started?
Perfect.
Excellent. So, like Faith had mentioned, we are going to be talking about the benefits of group and video interviews, kind of going out how we want to structure that, right? And just making sure that you're being as efficient as possible throughout that hiring journey. And having Faith here is going to be such a huge insight as well, because she does, like she had mentioned, run a specific department that is really geared towards helping out, our clients with that interview portion of hiring.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, what do you say we go ahead and get started?
Sounds
Excellent.
great.
And
Cool.
the first topic that we had wanted to talk about today is group interviews. So it's the idea of being able to interview multiple candidates at once to really get an idea as to how they interact with one another. And out of curiosity, Faith, how long have you been doing group interviews?
I would say probably closer to a year, maybe even 2 years at this point, doing group interviews. So we do that for all of our internal hiring. Anytime we need a new employee, whether that is in the service or sales department, we'll do
Awesome.
some group interviews. We do kind of a mixture though. I know, Monica, obviously we talked a little bit about the video interviewing too. So we do also do that as well. So we kind of offer both, but probably about a year or two with the group interviews. So
Sweet.
yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Which I mean kind of brings us into the next point, which is going over really some of those benefits with group
Yeah.
interviews. So, which out of these, or is there another one, Faith, out of curiosity, that you found to be extremely beneficial? Like, what would you say is probably the most important one?
Yeah, I think that obviously time saver is a really big one. I think for us, internal hiring, but also for our agents as well. One thing too is candidates interacting. This is a really important when, especially if you're hiring for like a sales position,
Yeah.
going to be so critical, right? Because if you have a candidate that you're looking to hire for sales, you want them to be kind of outgoing, you want them to be enthusiastic, right? You want them to kind of be the first one answering that question or showing enthusiasm.
Right.
So that can definitely help in that kind of capacity and kind of getting to know them a little bit, being in that kind of group setting ultimately. I think that really helps.
Definitely. And I think that actually leads us perfectly into like that maximizing communication, because
Yeah.
again, there's going to be certain attributes like Faith had mentioned that you're going to be looking for in that specific position, especially sales. I mean, shoot, even customer service, right? Maybe
Mhm.
someone that's a little more detail oriented. I think that seeing how each person interacts with one another and being able to see like, oh, maybe they're taking notes or maybe they came prepared, right? That could just be a couple of examples of different things that you're looking for, right? When conducting that. And then as well as the feedback at the end, right? You have a chance to collectively ask individuals like, are there any questions? Maybe feeling a little more apt to ask that compared
Mhm.
to being a little bit more reserved and saying no. Faith, I know that with hosting that, like, is that something that you've seen? More people asking questions and being a little bit more open.
I think so. I think, when you're one on one, I think a lot of times some candidates can be a little bit intimidating. And even
Yeah.
with group interviews, sometimes that could happen. But I think the nice thing about it is also kind of leads kind of back to that candidate interaction as well. When you have somebody that maybe asked a question, then you're like, oh, that was a great question, but actually, let me ask about this instead.
Right.
So it also kind of prompts other questions to be asked that maybe they didn't think about before either. That could challenge other candidates, but also the agency owner as well. So that
Right.
also kind of helps with the question asking at the end of the interview aspect of it.
Right. And, we actually do have EEOC compliant questions that you can ask to better help out with
Mhm.
that. If you would like to check out our help center, all you would have to do is just search up interview questions, right? And you'll get a great list of different EEOC compliant questions that you can ask during those stages.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that that is important to get just better understanding with how that candidate is and what exactly that you're looking for, which perfectly leads into our next topic is how are you going to structure that interview, right? Now, Faith,
Yeah.
out of curiosity, have you ever had an agent that just like was like, hey, I just really need to hire, like I have no idea what I'm going to ask them the day of the interview. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how was that?
Oh, all the time. There are tons of agents that come to us that do not have very much experience with group interviewing. And I always joke about it. And I'm like, well, that's what you hired me for, right? That's what you hired us for, right? The expertise that we provide. So I always will kind of go over what that looks like for them. I will kind of reference a little bit actually. In our help center, we do have an article that lays exactly out the best kind of template to use when you're conducting a group interview. We'll go over that for sure. I'll kind of reference that a little bit more during our next couple of slides, but that will really help as well. So our help center is always a great tool anytime. I'll also go over examples with them too on what to kind of help with, but you're not alone if you do not have experience in group interviewing. It's very normal to not have that. So it's new. So
Right.
you can
And
understand
I
it.
think that that's the overall goal of, these Wednesday webinars, right? Is to
Mhm.
really just educate on different materials, different ways, different, skills that you might obtain, right? With that hiring journey, because there's so many different paths and avenues that you can take
Right.
when on this road. And I just think having those different resources and maybe using this to better, be efficient with your time, right? Could be beneficial. Not saying that you
Yeah.
absolutely have to do group interviews to be successful. That's not what we're saying at all, right? We just want to provide as many, excuse me, tools as we can to help you be prepared if this is something that you would like to do.
Yes.
Which actually leads us to our question. Leonard said, "Hey Faith, long time no here. As you know, we're not doing group interviews. Is this a preferred method that I should be considering this? And if so, how do I incorporate that into our process?"
Yeah, so Leonard is actually one of my clients that I work with. So nice to hear from you, Leonard. um, so we actually do currently with the process. That's definitely something that we can kind of talk about and customize. Right now, Leonard's actually talking about our engagement program. So it's a little bit customizable to an agent's needs, whether we
Yeah.
do the group interviews or video interviews. So that's definitely something we can talk about for sure. Um, I think it's a big time saver. We'll also get into kind of the video interviews as well. That's also a great time saver as well. So it's just
Yeah.
your preference and what your overall goal is, but also what time you have allotted ultimately. Some agents have a little bit more flexibility and can do group interviews, 2 to 3 times a week. And some agents maybe can only do one-on-one interviews maybe once a week. So that's where those video interviews come into play. But that's definitely something, Leonard, we can talk about for sure. So,
Right. And I mean, even just with incorporating it into your process, I think for someone that might not be a part of our candidate engagement program, right?
mhm.
It really would just be overall looking at how you're currently setting up your interviews, right?
Yeah,
And saying instead of, sending it out to one person at a time, adding maybe two or three people onto that email, right? Saying, hey there, I would like to schedule an interview at this time with you and CC everyone. So that way, or even let them know inside of the email that it's going to be a group interview.
absolutely.
Come prepared with a couple of questions, right? And then that way they can better be prepared.
Yeah, and the
But
email templates inside I would say too, inside of your
yeah,
account as well is super easy too. So you can send them out if you just going through each of the candidates' profiles. It also makes it really easy to add that template in there too. So very easy to kind of incorporate that too. So just throwing that
excellent.
out there as well.
Lots of great tools to utilize with engaging your candidates,
Exactly.
right? Excellent. Well, that actually brings us to really going over the actual structure of it, right?
Yeah.
And I would say the overall goal, the reason I have this one up here at the top is because at the end of the day, we really want to understand that candidate and understanding if they're going to actually be a good fit for that position. Because the last thing that you want to do is make a reactive hire where you're just needing someone to fill a seat and then, you really didn't take that time to really understand and get to know them. So I think that
Mhm.
this was actually a really great segue into our next topic as well, because this is not only good for group interviews, but it's also good just for a regular interview, right? As well as, setting up the video interviews in the future, right? So, like I mentioned,
Absolutely.
I would say the overall goal is to be able to understand the candidate. And now, breaking that up, I think that there kind of comes into two parts, right? So, you have your asking your questions, and then you have your explaining the opportunity, right? So, kind of the first getting to know them and then actually really diving into what it is that you're looking for with that position.
Mhm.
So with that whole asking questions, now Faith, do you ever feel like there's sometimes like interviews that you might be a part of where you really didn't spend that much time like really getting to know them, maybe just like over elaborating on the position?
Sometimes, yeah, I think a lot of times, we can maybe get caught up on explaining the position or things like that, and maybe not allowing to kind of ask for questions. So I think pre-planning questions potentially, kind of having a list of questions that you do like to maybe ask, whether that's on an individual interview or a group interview, I think is important to have. And then, of course, maybe some questions that if you have time for them, great, but it's not like necessary to absolutely ask these questions. It would just be nice to kind of know this information. So I
Right.
absolutely for sure.
Right. And I agree because I mean, the more that you get to understand them and the more that you better get
Yeah.
to like really hit close to, if you have specific questions for that position, I think it
Hmm.
would really just segue that into explaining the opportunity that much
Yeah.
easier. Um,
Absolutely.
so with that asking the questions, right, I have listed down here, bringing in a coworker to ask questions as well. I think it's super great. I mean, with group interviews, you get to see like how complete strangers are or, potential coworkers of yours maybe, right? But to actually have someone that's in that role that you're hiring for to
Hmm.
ask you questions, right? Or to ask to give you a better insight as to what they can expect. I think that that can also be beneficial because that way they can really get a sense of what they're expecting from someone in that position compared to a managing perspective.
Absolutely. I think it's very beneficial when you have somebody that does that kind of day in and day out. It brings a different perspective maybe to that manager that does manage them day to day. Having somebody that is doing it, those day to day responsibilities helps um, to like Monica said, bring another perspective. Ultimately, it's very helpful.
Definitely. And then, I mean, and it goes to ask yourself as well, like, what personality are you looking for? As many of you know, Ideal Traits, we are um, mainly an applicant tracking system, right? So being able to understand that there are different personalities that fit for specific positions, maybe better than others, right? So what personality are you looking for, whether that's from assessing your staff, friends, family members of a similar personality that you may be looking to fill that role, right? And then being able to use those results for being able to find that right candidate.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Assess your current staff. It's important.
definitely. Which, I mean, brings us to the explaining the opportunity, right? I think
Yeah.
one of the most important parts is to be transparent. Now, Faith, have you seen like people that just kind of like on the flip side, right? Spending too much time getting to know the candidate and not really explaining what that position is about? Is that more common or?
I haven't had too many candidates or even agents that have kind of come to me with this. I would say it's kind of they're normally pretty good about explaining the opportunity. I think that they're also aware that they're not only interviewing a candidate, that candidate is also interviewing you as well. So really
Yeah.
making sure that they are explaining that opportunity. What are their goals going to be like? Is there a certain quota that they're going to have to meet? But also the benefits as well. What perks come with the position as well, besides just the PTO or potential health insurance or things like that. So
Hmm.
that also helps them too. So.
Right. And when explaining like different like the positions to the candidate, even just like on the first like phone screen, is that something that you typically start off with stating, like setting that from the beginning, or is that something that you try to ease into?
It's a great question. I typically what I'll do is kind of go over the expectations of the opportunity first, really going
Okay.
over what those quotas and things are, and
Yeah.
then I'll go over the benefits as well. But then allow them to kind of into your next point, allow time for questions,
Right.
making sure that they can ask any questions that they need to. Kind of going over maybe salary expectations, or
Yeah.
if there is maybe some benefits that they aren't 100% sure on, or maybe even goals that they're not 100% sure on, or daily responsibilities, anything like that.
Right. Just kind of getting everything out in the open just from the very beginning
Exactly.
so that way they fully understand the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Now, and is that done like in a phone call? Is that done like during the video interview? Or is this like the first initial interview that you're setting up with the candidate?
Yeah, so I would say usually when I'm kind of talking about it, if I'm going to schedule an interview, I will always ask them, "Do you have any questions before the interview?"
Yeah.
That way, that still gives them that opportunity to ask any questions.
Okay.
Usually, what we then end up doing is explaining the opportunity and being transparent, of course, during that first initial interview. Usually, so Yes and no, I would say. Yes, if they have questions, we'll
Yeah.
be, of course, transparent. But if we don't, we usually typically wait until that first interview, just so we can go over, lay everything out at one time ultimately. So,
Definitely. And I
yeah.
think what's important as well is just learning how someone else handles their interviews, right?
Yeah, for
Because it
sure.
may be something that works for you, and on the flip side, might not work for the agency down the road.
Mhm.
And I think just, hearing like just, chatting about this is just like shooting off so many different ideas in my head because it's like
Yeah.
hiring is just such a complex,
There's so many
thing,
different
right?
ways that you can interview one person.
Exactly,
So many.
right. Definitely.
So,
But
yeah,
I think that having just the overall structure of it definitely going to help out a lot with making sure
absolutely.
everything stays organized.
For sure.
Excellent. So the next slide that I have that I wanted to touch base on was video interviews. So now with video interviews, this is actually a really neat feature because it's actually something that we just recently launched inside of our Ideal Traits platform, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
easily being able to integrate video interviews with your hiring process.
Mhm.
Um, I know, Faith, I believe with the candidate engagement program, that is something that's being used, correct?
Yeah, actually. So with each of the agent that joins, they actually have the option whether to do group interviews or video interviews. Right now, it's probably split down the middle. They have 50% doing group interviews. I have 50% doing video interviews. So,
Okay,
but it is an option. Yes.
excellent. So, and
Yeah.
then really just going over some of the benefits of the video interviews as well. I mean, similar to group interviews, right? Still being a major time saver,
Hmm.
mobile compatible, right? So I know Faith and I were actually chatting about it, and it was like, hey, if you're on the road, you gotta skedaddle, but you wanted to watch this like maybe on your way to somewhere, or maybe wanted to listen to how they reacted, right?
Hmm.
Easily being able to pull that up on your phone and being able to listen to the recordings.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Monica.
No, I was just gonna say that I think that with someone that always takes their phone everywhere, I think that that's super convenient because, like, I'd be like, "Oh shoot, I meant to do this." Easily can log into my Ideal Trades account and pull that candidate's information up.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the nice thing too about the video interviews too is like it mentions here, it's mobile compatible, which is really nice. So if you are kind of maybe you're taking a train to Chicago for the weekend, or if you're going on a ski trip and you're in the car for a long period of time, not while you're
Yeah.
driving, please don't do that.
Yes.
But
Be
you
safe
can,
and responsible.
yes. But you can view those video interviews as well. So it, it
Right.
it makes it very very easy to kind of view them on the go ultimately. So.
Now, is this something like that you feel like is like? Do you really get to know them from the video interview?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it depends on the questions that you ask. So
Okay.
we actually have a list of 50 questions on our help center that I will always send our engagement program clients. But anybody has access to it. Anybody that is an Ideal Traits client of ours has access to that help center and those
Yeah.
questions as well. Um, and I would say, gosh, those interview questions are very helpful as far as learning somebody because the video interviews really helps them with their enthusiasm and the personality wise, I feel like it's really shown
Yeah.
in with those video interviews. That's like the main kind of, I would say, the number one thing that really helps with the video interviews. Of course, you can have a phone call, you can kind of hear their tone of voice and their phone presence and kind of maybe gauge a little bit, but having the video and having it right front and center for you really helps with kind of gauging that personality. How bubbly are
Definitely.
they? How enthusiastic are they? How are they answering the questions? That really helps. Of course,
Right.
that does depend on the type of questions you're asking, but that's overall you definitely can still learn a lot about that candidate from those video interviews for sure.
Right. And for someone that's maybe not familiar with how our video interviews work, right? What you
Mhm.
will basically do is that once you sign up for the program, what's super convenient is that you'll be able to create different positions that you're hiring for, right? And then you can then insert a few questions. And I believe it's up to 5, correct?
Yes.
Up to 5 questions, right? And this is super convenient because that way you're not overloading the potential candidate with too many questions before you even get to meet with them, right?
Hmm.
So it's a few questions to really dial in to better get to know them, like Faith had mentioned, see their personality, hear how they react. You can actually adjust how many attempts they have. So, like, let's say if you only want to give them one attempt to shoot this, and if they mess up, they mess up. That's what they're sending in. Or if you
Hmm.
want to give them a couple, right? And you can actually set the time parameter. So if it's a little more in-depth question, you can make that bare minimum time. You can scale that, right? So let's say maybe to 15 seconds or maybe 30 seconds and set the maximum time at, let's say, a minute or a minute and a half, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then the candidate would be able to then take the video interview, right from their phone. They'd take it and then they would submit it, and you'd be able to easily watch it before even interacting with them, right? So even before picking up the phone and calling with them, you could easily send them over that video interview to then have that insight before meeting them.
Absolutely. Yep.
Super convenient.
It's a great rundown of it and explaining it. So good job.
Right. Yeah. I just realized, I was like, oh shoot, not everyone deals with video interviews every day. That's odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is something that we're very passionate about because, again, more tools, more resources that we want to provide with you guys to being able to interact with these candidates, right?
Absolutely.
As efficiently as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So another topic that we wanted to really highlight on was assessing your staff. I think that it's super important with just being able to better understand them, better understanding them for the position that you're hiring for, right? And using them as a benchmark. So one key point that I try to highlight on every single webinar of ours is definitely assess your staff, assess yourself even, once a quarter, just to better get to understand yourself too, and then being able to structure your interviews effectively around that person.
Yeah. It's a good tip.
Excellent. So next up is the thanks for attending. I do want to just give Faith again a quick shout out for attending. She did want to talk briefly about a great new program that we also have as well.
Yeah, so I know I kind of mentioned it a little bit before. It was that engagement program. So really what that really kind of does is we kind of take over your Ideal Traits account and help with really connecting with your candidates ultimately. So we help with a number of making sure they're contacted when they apply, to thank them for applying and go over that assessment with them to really increase that assessment completion rate. And then we also have that option, like I had mentioned, between the video interviews and group video interviews, once they do end up completing that assessment as well. So if you are interested, something that you might want to consider, let me know. I will have, you can always reach out to me. It's on our main page if you want to fill out an information card. That's always there. It's an option as well. So I loved being on here today, Monica, to kind of teach people about it a little bit. I don't normally join these, so thanks for having me. I'm usually behind the screen, to be honest with you. So it was good to be on camera and in front of everybody today. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining, Faith. And I just think having another perspective, especially with someone, like you said, that actually runs that program here at Ideal Traits for us, right? You are always hosting interviews and really interviewing candidates, better getting to know them. So who best to have explaining interviews in general, right, than you.
Sure.
So I think your insight is really greatly appreciated. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. What I will go ahead and do is post the link for next week's webinar. So if you would like to check that out, we are going to be going over writing titles, effective job ad titles. So if that is something that you would like to get registered for, you can go ahead and sign up there. But no, thank you so much for attending. And if you do have any questions, Faith and I will stick around here for a couple more minutes to answer that. But thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and wait and see if there's anyone else that has any other questions.
Awesome. I think next week's topic too is going to be great as well. So I might join that just as a participant.
No, I think that there are so many different job ad titles that could potentially be out there. So really dialing in and understanding how to write an effective one without being too crazy, right?
100%. I agree.
Excellent. Well, I don't think that there's any other questions, so I will go ahead and end today's webinar. So again, thank you so much for joining. We wish you all the best with your hiring journey. And again, Faith, thank you for joining today. We greatly appreciate having you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks. Have a nice one.